Are you ready to join me in transforming fear to freedom? That's the objective of the show. Are you ready to explore with me and my guests? Are you ready to get into the deep and play? This is where it's at, and that's what it's all about. No medical advice here. Use discernment and decide for yourself if the information is right for you. All views and opinions expressed on this show belong to the individual and are not necessarily shared with the producer of the show. Want more details? Go to letsgetrealchattingwithcatherine.com. Now let's get real and have some fun. Who are we going to explore with today? Come on with me and let's get into the deep. Good evening, dear friends. Welcome back to Let's Get Real, Chatting with Catherine. I'm your host and the producer of Let's Get Real, Chatting with Catherine, the online chat show where we go into the deep and explore. And tonight, I have the pleasure of having Lee Horbachewski back with me. She was a guest in 2012 where we were chatting about mental illness. And you can go back and listen to that show. It's still online on demand on the show page of Let's Get Real Chattingwithcatherine.com or lgrcc.com. And I wanted to catch up with Lee because she's got some exciting news. For one thing, she is relaunching the book, A Quiet, Strong Voice. And that's going to be March 3rd, the official new launch. And so after the first the book came out, and she went into a lot of promoting the book, but also really standing up to bring awareness to mental illness and to help get rid of the stigma attached to it. But I've read the book since her new version, and what I love about it so much is that she has brought it to a place where this book is not just about mental illness. It's about everybody. It's about self-esteem. It's about dealing with your stuff, dealing with anger, dealing with what she's learned, hard-earned lessons. You know, she's got some real wisdom, and she's sharing it. So we don't all have to go through this stuff. We can learn from each other. And I appreciate so much that she has shared a very personal story with the world, and that she has taken those lessons and said, okay, this is what I know now. Had I known that, I learned this. And I love it because we can apply it in everyday lives. And the other part of it was an insight into what can be going on with people. And sometimes it's family, it's friends, or it could be a complete stranger that you run into and you think, what's up with them? What's going on? And it could be something is going on. And maybe your smile, your kindness, your patience, your compassion could make the difference. And I think that's really important. And I really appreciate that Lee has shared this. You can go to, again, the website, Let's Get Real Chattingwithcatherine.com, go to the guest tab at the top navigation bar and look for Lee's name, and you'll find her guest profile and book information, some resources, some really helpful tips on how to get the book. So it's all there, and I couldn't be happier to be able to sit down and have a chat with her tonight. So we're going to get right into it right now. Lee Horbachewski, author of A Quiet, Strong Voice. Welcome to Let's Get Real, Chatting with Catherine. Lee, I am so thrilled. It's been 2 years since we chatted, and a lot's been going on, and I'm so excited that you're relaunching your book, and so I'm just so thrilled that you've agreed to join me here tonight.
Well, I'm really grateful for this opportunity. Yeah, 2 years. It's gone quite fast.
It's amazing. It doesn't seem like it could be that long. I had to look back because I thought it had only been last year, but no, 2 years, 2012. So a lot's been going on, and I am really excited that you are relaunching the book. And having read it, I am so thrilled to be able to share with people my insight from reading it as well. And that's that this is not just about mental illness. This is about life. This is about some of the really big things that we so often don't even recognize that could contribute to a mental illness or just our overall ability to cope with life. And so A Quiet, Strong Voice is the name of the book. And I love that. And I love the way you've used that in the book. I don't want to give away everything, but that's so powerful, Lee. So what made you decide to relaunch?
I always knew I would relaunch. When I first launched it in May 25th, 2012, I had ordered a shipment of 500 copies, and they sold out in a month. And then that summer I fell into a deep depression, and a very deep depression. And I made the decision in November of 2012 to pull back from everything. My business, my coaching, my speaking, on like social media. I was very well known on Twitter and Facebook, and I really just pulled back. And as I reevaluated this past November and looked at the year to come, 2014, I knew without a doubt this was the year to relaunch. And I'm in a good place mentally, I'm in a good place spiritually, and I've always known that this book needs to be out there for millions of people that go through depression.
So when you initially had this started after the birth of your second child, and when I read about the situation, actually the lead up, I could feel the signs, the overwhelm, the life itself was really packing it on to you. And the fact that you didn't have the skills, the tools to deal with it, which is revealed in the book where you're saying what I know now, which I thought was absolutely beautiful because, I really feel like we don't all have to learn the same lessons. We can learn from each other. And that's what I think your book is. So you're giving the insight for people who maybe don't have mental illness, but maybe they have very low self-esteem or very poor tools to deal with life that could lead to other imbalances. So you didn't have any, the way you tell it in the book, you didn't have any indication that you were having postpartum depression.
Well, no, I did have indications of it, but I didn't know what postpartum depression was.
Exactly.
And, the little, the crying and the baby blues, as everyone refers to them, I just, slept it off as just being, I'm tired, I'm up 3-4 times a night. And so I really, I didn't know that something was wrong.
But what about I know now, I just, have a very close person in my life, and I was with them for one of those first visits to the public health unit type of thing. And they ask questions like, if you're feeling depressed and whatever. And I don't know, has it gotten any better from what, how come your doctor wasn't picking up on this? When yes, you might think, because you have an older child and a new baby, and you're, like you say, the baby blues, or some people, can't get dressed, or they don't feel they can cope. But aren't there some kinds of triggers that a doctor, that when you go for your 6-week checkup, you go with the baby, don't those questions get asked?
Well, it's interesting. The doctor that I have now, that has been our family doctor pretty much since I moved here, I had actually gone with another doctor for about a period of 1.5 years. And it was during this time that I was with this doctor. And he missed the boat on a lot of things.
Okay. And
big time.
Yes.
I'm very grateful that I learned that early on, the hard way, but we eventually went back to my now family doctor, and she asks those questions.
Yeah.
But I also have to take responsibility myself, because I know of one instance where he had asked me a question about, are you feeling depressed? I automatically became defensive and like, what do you mean depressed? No, I'm not depressed, because I had this judgment back then that depression was
wrong,
crazy. It's wrong, so he asked the question, but I do remember actually being defensive and going, no.
Yeah.
So it also comes down to an honesty from the patient, from my, point of view, to say, okay, take ownership and be completely honest.
Well, and I love that about the book. That's the thing that makes your book stand out in so many ways to me, is because you actually did not start pointing fingers. It wasn't about pointing fingers. It wasn't about shame. It wasn't about blame. It wasn't about society's all wrong. You didn't do any of that. You really owned your story. You owned your experience. And you allowed, I felt like by doing that, you allowed the rest of us to also, when reading the book, go, actually, I do that to myself. I beat myself up. I don't express my feelings. Maybe I'm angry, but I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, so I don't say that they just hurt me. There were so many beautiful examples, and I love that you, by taking ownership, it's like you empowered the reader, so that there was no feeling of anybody's wrong, and I in asking the question to you, how could the doctor miss it? It's not really because I want to blame anybody. I'm hoping that this conversation we're having tonight, aside from being fun, because I always like them to be fun, but yeah. I also hope that if there's doctors listening, they also will be a little more aware that even the word depression, if you ask somebody if they're depressed, what does that mean? I'm coming up, personally, I'm coming up to my son's anniversary and of his death. So that's March 15th for me, and it'll be 2 years. The first year, which was 2012, he was killed in a car accident. And I don't know if you remember that, but because we did the show after that. But the thing about it was that first year I was in a blur. I didn't really even recognize, and then the year came up. And it's only this second year now, I started in February feeling like dreading the anniversary. And I thought, well, isn't this weird? But I recognized that the period of shock has worn off, and now it's settling in. But if someone said to me, are you depressed? I would probably say, no, I'm not depressed, but I'm sad. Mm-hmm. So if somebody asked me, are you sad? Then I'd say yes. But if they said, are you depressed? I would probably say no. So we need better language. We need a better way to just like not ask those kinds of questions that are just one answer, yes or no. There needs to be more inquiry. And this isn't, I'm not trying to blame anybody. We haven't had the tools, clearly. Most of us.
And that's why in the chapter that I write about supporting a loved one, I actually provide some scripts. And that's exactly what you're talking about. One of the reasons why I say, ask your loved one. I've noticed that you haven't been yourself lately. Mm-hmm. I'm here for you. How can I help you? What can I do? So it's not bringing up the word depression. I personally have no problem saying the word depression now.
Yeah.
Right? But the truth of the matter is, you're right. It's most people will put their back up against the wall like I once did.
Yeah.
No, I'm not depressed. What do you mean? And get defensive. And then when we become defensive, we tend to shut down. And that relationship, then a wall is built in between. So that's why, in one of the scripts there, I purposely don't use the word depression. I've noticed you're not yourself lately.
These are beautiful, beautiful tools. Like, that's what I love about it, is you give us some tools to interact with people that we love and that we are concerned about, without having to point a finger and say, I think you're mentally ill, or I think you're something wrong with you, or I think you need medication. I mean, we haven't been trained in these kinds of tools, and I think, I mean, I always say life gives you these things so that, you know, there's always something to it. And to me, you're offering wisdom. This isn't just knowledge you researched and said, well, this is what I think in theory. You actually went through all of these experiences and share them with us in a very beautiful way that I've never read before, in that way, not sensationalized, not just for the emotional impact, although it can be. I mean, you have compassion when you're reading, because you can't imagine like how it must have been for you, feeling so disconnected and from your family, but also for your family not knowing what to do. How can we help you? And you know, and that's some of the things that I love that you shared the way you did, Lee. It's powerful, really powerful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So what do you hope to gain by relaunching it now? Because I feel like this is in a different energy too. Like even the energy of 2014 is a different energy. And do you find that people are open to the book more, or open to conversation more now?
I don't think we're any more open to conversation about it than we were 2 years ago, which is sad.
Okay.
I see more. You know, I just resurfaced on Twitter after being not on Twitter for 2 years, and I was going through some old accounts and just seeing what people were, you know, tweeting about, and it's still the same. You know, it's still the same fight to reduce the stigma. You know, and I've really, over this past year, I've taken the word fight out of my vocabulary. I've been depression-free now for a year because I believe that I found love in depression. I love depression. I'm grateful for it. And there's this fight mentality still going on. So
but that's in a lot of things in our lives. If we and that's something I have also let go of, that belief that, because we've had a war on drugs, we had war on cancers, we've had war, and everything we've declared a war on, we're still fighting 20 years later. So to me, that's plenty of proof that fighting against or fighting for isn't really what we need. We need different tools and different language, and that's what I do feel about the energy of your book, Lee, is not a fight. It's about sharing in a really safe way.
Yeah. And I think that I really, that has not changed. My belief from 2 years ago is that in sharing, in truth and in authenticity, that's when barriers break down. That's when healing occurs. When we can just, you know, approach things with such vulnerability and openness.
Yeah.
And when we're up against the wall, like I mentioned before, in this fight mentality and anger, and it's only inviting it, I believe, more into yourself. And last February, I actually did a healing session with Fauna Buse. And this is actually what really took me down this journey of loving depression. She had me visualize going into this, a place that brought me peace, which is the ocean. And she had me visualize sinking to the bottom of the ocean and resting in a crevice of depression.
Wow.
And finding peace in that crevice of depression. And I can honestly say that was the beginning point of me finding peace in depression and stopping the frustration towards it, the resentment, the anger that I had, of it taking so much from my life. And that's when everything began to shift. And I've applied that in most of the areas, pretty much all the areas of my life over the past year. And it's a beautiful way to be.
Yeah, I heard it said recently something, and I really liked it. It was about not owning your disease. Like, people will say, my depression, my cancer, my, you know, it's not, if you own it that way, it becomes, it is you. Rather own the love, own the responsibility, but it isn't you. Like, that's sort of allowing yourself, loving it, forgiving it, and so forth, but not claiming it as if it's you. Like, you know, like, it's at home here. Well, I don't actually want it to be at home here. I want the harmony, the peace, the love, the joy, you know. And that, I think that there's a difference between loving something, accepting it, okay, it is, but letting it go. You know, I've learned my lesson from it. And I get the sense that you have taken this very hard road, but there's this beautiful gold in it, in the sense that you are an amazing woman that can share it in a way that maybe somebody else couldn't. Like, only one person can be Lee, and it's you. And only you can share it in exactly that way. So, I mean, even though I'm not saying that you would want to have that experience, you did have it. And and you've turned it around, so, which is awesome. I mean, it's totally awesome. So, and the other thing in the book, you talked about like so many parts of the journey. You were on, I don't know if you still are, but you were on medication, right? For so this is something I don't fully understand, and I think maybe some of our listeners might be curious about it. Is postpartum depression, is it just the hormonal imbalance, or did that trigger something more in you, or is it something that requires medication, or how does, you know, and do you have to be on it for the rest of your life if that is the case? What's your experience? I know you're not a doctor. We're not giving medical advice. I'm not trying to say that. And everybody knows that's not what the show's about. This, I'm talking, what's Lee's experience in...
Yeah. Well, with postpartum depression, from what I know and what I understand about it, it is a hormonal imbalance. And as with, you know, actual depression, because it's two completely different things, it's with anything. You know, I've taken antidepressants since I was, you know, had the depression, and I'm actually now working very closely with my doctor, weaning myself off very slowly. But I came to this place of, at first, you know, I was like, no, I'm not going to take drugs. You know, you hear all these things, and you know, I even had family members and friends really judge me for the choice to do it. Oh, you've got to get off that crap, you know, whereas, you know, things like this. And I just came to this acceptance that, you know what, if I need to be on this for the rest of my life, so be it. And if I don't, great. But with any sort of treatment, it is really unique to each individual.
Right.
Some you know, antipsychotic drugs or antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication does not work for some people, whether it be for their own beliefs, maybe it's their biological makeup. You know, their side effects are terrible. Right. So some people can't take it, but there are so many other, you know, I did a very combined treatment. I took antidepressants. I had a psychologist, a psychiatrist. I've worked with counselors and coaches. You know, then the meditation side of things, you know, what brought me peace. So, you know, it's really up to the individual person. And I don't believe there's any right or wrong. That's my personal belief. Right. If someone needs to take it, they need to take it. Yeah. If someone doesn't want to take it, they don't have to take them.
Yeah, so they have to work with their own physicians and caregivers and so forth to make their decisions. But I also think you're talking about something so much more than that, and in the book you also talk about it, and that's that wholeness of person, you know, that it's not just because what I really picked up on was the postpartum depression that happened to you, and hormonal imbalance and all, but there were so many aspects of your life that you didn't have the tools to deal with prior to that. the actual birth of your daughter was traumatic. There were things that happened that if there had been some intervention at some different points, some comfort, some support, different things that could be considered just really traumatic, and and if not dealt with, then they spiral, and it becomes that heap, things heaping up on top of, piling up until you just can't do it anymore. And I think that's where what I liked about the book was because there's so many places where you gave tools that if someone's reading it, they could use those tools so that they don't have to have it pile up. Would you, if you had to have those tools as a young girl, because it looks like some of this stuff started way, way before. I know in my life, I didn't have the tools as a young girl. And a lot of things that happen afterwards, I can see now, had I had the tools, I would have probably done things differently. Not that I have any regrets, but just, you know better, you do better. So do you think that if you had that maybe you could have, or the postpartum wouldn't have led to so much depression, or how do you feel about that?
You know what? Had I had the tools that I learned that are shared in the book before that, I think it would have been a very different outcome. I don't think I would have been as scared or in denial for so long. I would have been, courageous enough and willing enough to seek the help that I needed when that first came up. So had I had the tools that I learned over that time, I think that a lot of that would have been avoided.
Well, one of the tools that I see, and this is just from the way I read it and the way from my own perceptions of my own life, but the biggest thing I saw out of all of them was finding your voice. Because if you have your voice, you would know enough to ask, or you would know enough to say, hey, you're hurting me, or I'm angry about this, or this is inappropriate, or what happened in the delivery room. You would have felt like you could speak. And I think for a lot of us, that's part of the reason depression to me is anger turned inwards. You've got all this anger about things that have happened and feeling like you weren't heard. If we had our voices, like I'm kind of looking for there's so many juicy gifts that you've given people and tools, but to me, that is the big one. If we could give that to our children, letting them know that they have a right to speak up however they feel. It's important, I don't know if that's my perception, but that seems like that's the biggest one. What about you? What's the biggest tool that you wish you had?
I love that you have brought that up, and especially as children. My daughters are 14 and 10. And my husband and I were just talking the other, our 14-year-old daughter was sharing with us some conversations back and forth her and a friend are having. And Neil, my husband, he just looked at me and he's like, did you ever talk like this at this age? I'm like, no. Like, they're talking so openly. And that's one of the things that I've empowered my girls and tried to teach my girls is to have their own voice. Because I think that's where self-esteem comes in. That's where confidence and more authentic relationships occur. And once we have authentic connection, first with ourselves, it's so much easier to have that with others. And then that just snowballs to so many gifts in our lives. And I see it especially, my 10-year-old came home 2 weeks ago, and she's like, Mom, so-and-so was talking about, so-and-so behind their back. And I just said, look, you know what? I don't want to hear about it. If you got a problem with her, why don't you say it to her face? And I just sat there and I was like, oh my, because I was having this conversation with my 14-year-old about a month ago and was giving her pointers on how to, respond if that happened. She had pretty much done word for word that. So she was listening in to my teaching moment with my 14-year-old, and she applied it. She's 10.
Yeah. It's
She's found that voice.
Yeah, but they are. That's the thing is a lot of times, I remember this other woman I knew who had one child who she couldn't just sit down and talk to and say, this is talk to them in that way. Which if she wanted that person to get the message, that child to get the message, some message, whatever it was she was trying to teach, she had to tell it to the other child and let that one overhear it. It was hilarious, but she knew it, and she knew her kids. She knew what, and that's, he would just be in the other room and he'd be hearing the whole thing and get the whole message, but he wouldn't take it directly. So, I mean, that's really important to be able to have those relationships with our children and know how they learn. Like some of them will listen, just come to you and say, I have a problem, and ask for your insight, whereas others will hear the advice and apply it, and but that's an important part of it too, is that you have that open conversation where your children can come to you.
Yes. And that's, going back to what you're asking, what do you think is the most valuable tool? I definitely think finding your voice is one. And it's being open and speaking your truth. It's speaking your truth from a place of love. Mm-hmm. And I know that's how I live my life. And I'm seeing actually my daughters, begin to do that. My husband even, he's like, oh, I never knew what you meant about speaking your truth from love. But, now he gets it. Yeah. But the other tool that I think is really huge in there is the boundaries. And boundaries for me have been life-changing. Mm-hmm. Having healthy boundaries, knowing them, sticking by them, and that has been life-changing for me, especially over this past year, is to really have healthy boundaries set up around what I value.
Well, can you, for people who are watching, this is a term, healthy boundaries, is something that is expressed a lot in a lot of personal development work and that kind of thing. But if you're not familiar with that, you might not even realize what is a healthy boundary. I, for one, recognize in myself prior to doing a lot of work, I had no boundaries at all. I had nothing for me. And for me, it was about if somebody said, can you do this? I assumed they would never ask me if they could do it themselves, and that I must have to do it. I had a mentality of servitude in every aspect, in my home life, with my extended family, and with my work, and also with the world. So to me, that is where there isn't. So for you, what do you mean when you say healthy boundaries, so that people can kind of get that?
Yep. Well, I can actually give you two examples that occurred today.
Okay.
So one actually on my A Quiet Strong Voice Facebook page, I had someone send me a message asking me to promote a course that they have that looked great to my readers, and they would give them 50% off. And I read it and I looked at it, but I didn't go into too much detail because I knew what the answer was. And I replied to her and I said, you know what, thank you for reaching out. I love what you're doing. But I made a promise to myself a long time ago and a boundary around what I share. And I only share what I believe in 100% and what I've experienced myself. So thank you for reaching out, but at this time I can't do that. So the boundary I have there is very clear. For my own integrity and for people who trust me, I don't recommend something just so I get an affiliate payment or so this person will share me in return. I will only share or promote something that I believe or have experienced firsthand.
Right.
That's one boundary. Another one that came up today is the athletic director at our school. I've just finished back-to-back coaching of our junior volleyball team, now our junior basketball team. And he asked me to coach the junior floor hockey team starting next week. And, I said to him, I am so humbled and grateful that you think so highly of me to ask again, but I have to say no. I have my book launch coming up next week. Yeah. with 6 weeks, of publicity. So, I have to decline. I'm sorry, but I just can't do that. So I've set up a boundary again. I know that my family knows that for the next 6 weeks, I am committed to the publicity of launching my book. So, but prior, I would have gone, okay, yes, I'll do that, and yes, I'll do that. But this way, I stay focused on what, I've committed to.
And also, you can give your best to each thing you do commit to. And the thing that I find interesting about it, and I don't know what your experience of this, I'm curious about it, is until you do set those boundaries, firmly knowing what they are, a lot of times people will hear, different people saying, you have to learn to say no, and you have to learn to, and so people do that. They say, okay, I'm going to say no and then they get all this flack and feedback and, try to guilt them into it and shame them into it and all this kind of thing. And what I've found is that if you haven't actually done your work in the sense of understanding what are my boundaries, like you really know that you're saying something about somebody wants you to promote something, but you have a sort of a boundary. You have a set of principles and values that you have put into that, so that you don't have to think about it a long time. You know that doesn't fit into it, and this isn't healthy for me, so then you can just say no, and I would think have no backlash, or at least not so much where people can manipulate, like, well, I would do this for you, or you want me to help you, or whatever the backlash, or the coach might say, but you know what, we don't have anybody else to do it, and the kids aren't going to get to play if you don't coach, and it's going to be, do you find that because you have set that you're not getting that kind of negative or pressure, or what's your experience with that? Because I think it's really important to know why you did it, what you value, and how you set them. And then I think the benefit.
And that's, you brought up a very important point around values. I know exactly what I value, and that's the first step to setting boundaries. If you just turn around and say no to someone half-heart, without that groundedness within yourself, you're going to, receive that kind of stuff. I know my values. My number one value is my family. My commitment to them, quality time spent with them. People know that I'll rarely go to events on weekends, because weekends is my family time. I log off social media on weekends. I never used to. I used to let it run my life.
Yeah.
But that's my number one value and commitment. My next one is connection with family and friends, extended family and friends. It's really important to me to have authentic and real connection with the people that I love. Another one is adventure. I love to travel. I love traveling with my family. Generosity, so charities, giving back, whether it's my time, energy, or financial input. I know I'm very rooted in those values. So if someone asks me something, the first question I ask myself, will this impact the time we've spent with my family? And if it does, am I willing to say to my family, okay, guys, I'm going to look at this. What do you think? And so I'm very clear. I go through these little questions of, okay, how is it going to impact what I value? Does it align with what I value? And just knowing, even in those little pieces, as you had said, about, what I promote, I'm very clear. That's one thing I've been very clear on.
And do you give yourself, like, even though you've set it up, because a lot of times people get in the phone rings and it's the school and they're saying, we need 24 cupcakes for tomorrow morning and nobody else can do it. Can you do it? And people don't know enough, or not know enough, but they're trained to have to say yes or no right now. They don't allow themselves, like what you're saying is this going to work with my family? So to me, that means you're not making a snap decision. So you are allowing yourself, you've given yourself permission to have the information come in and do a proper analysis, which to me feels like healthier for you, but also healthier for whatever it is you say you're going to give your time and commitment to. Because once you say it, then you've said, now there's no guilt. It's fitting in your parameters.
Yeah, none whatsoever. And I love living my life like this. At first it was effort.
Yes.
Now it's just natural. It just appears. And the lady that I said no to today, she replied back straight away, and she's like, "Thank you so much for responding."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's people. We have been trained not to take this time. Like a lot of our schooling and everything is taught to get through the school system, get a job, make money, have a family, and now you'll be happy. But we didn't get the tools on, okay, but how do we cope with, like you say, girls talking behind my back, which it's happening in with a 10-year-old, it's happening with the 14-year-old, it's happening with 50-year-olds, it's happening in the workforce, it's happening, right? And if we could, those kinds of skills, if they're taught at that age, that person is going to be, the rest of the stuff, as far as getting a job and all that stuff, that's going to happen. But how we deal with our day-to-day is where we need those tools. And I really, I just can see it so clearly. And the way you've broken everything down from each incident or challenge that you kind of went through, and then, look, here's what I learned from this, and here's, an exercise, and here, so powerfully that to help people to create those boundaries. It's like it's a book, it's a story, but it's also a workbook. It's wonderful.
Thank you. No, and I really wanted, I wanted something, and with this relaunch, I did add a couple of sections in the personal reflection chapter that were from that weren't in the first edition. Mm-hmm. And I felt really strongly because one of them was boundaries. Mm-hmm. And because I was a coach, a professional coach, this is what I did when I had my coaching clients, asking thought-provoking questions. We all have our answers within us. It's just being asked the right question. Debbie Ford wrote the book, The Right Questions. Mm-hmm. It's a great book. If you ask the right questions and I don't want to say the right way because there's no right or wrong in my mind, but, in a healthy, loving way. Mm-hmm. Like if you ask a question that comes across with a, looking down on you tone, you're going to get, that wall, like someone responding in an unhealthy way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But so on the other side of, having launched the book and then recognizing you still hadn't really set healthy boundaries, which is why you kind of got overwhelmed. And then you had to take some time for yourself to put that in place. And I think that's really important for people, regardless of whether or not you are dealing with a clinical depression or mental illness or, anything like that. What you're talking about are life skills, because sometimes people don't end up in a psychiatric ward, or they don't end up getting medicated. But man, they are in chaos, they are in turmoil, they are in pain, and sometimes they end up doing things like giving it up, committing suicide, or doing other self-destructive things because they just didn't have the tools. And as sometimes it's something so simple as not having someone to hear them.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's, that is, in my experience, in my personal experience, and with people that I've worked with and I've heard from, that is the number one thing. It is human nature. People want to feel heard. That's why judgment and this stigma and everything, and not just mental illness, it's just life. People want to be acknowledged. Mm-hmm. They want to be heard. They want to be loved. Mm-hmm. That's life. That's a, yeah.
Well, and the thing is, I really feel that because we think of mental illness as something separate from physical illness, but it is just as much, if not more so in some cases, debilitating. And we need to it's not like there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of blame, even around, like you say, you got on the defensive when somebody asks you if you're depressed. Why? Because somehow that would indicate you're weak. You can't handle your life. You just had a couple of babies. That woman over there had 24 kids and she never had a problem. You know, you hear all that stuff, right? So yep. we equate that if we are sad for an inappropriate amount of time, according to somebody else, there's something wrong with us, or that we are weak because we can't handle life. And, you know, it doesn't mean that you may not have had an awful lot of tragedy. You may not have. You may have just had little tiny things happen. But everybody's different. And the amount of pain and rejection and abandonment I can handle and someone else can handle will not be the same thing. You know? Yeah. And I think this is important. Like, what I like... I like your book in so many ways. And I do not promote things because I get paid to promote anything, actually. I get a thrill when I discover something, when I'm curious about it, and I want to share it. So that's what your book is, such a tool in so many ways for so many different aspects of life. And the big thing, I think, is we got to get rid of... we don't have to, but it would be really healthy for us as a species if we would recognize the fact that sometimes life is just hard. And and just because it's not hard for you, that particular thing, it might be hard for somebody else. And to have compassion. You know, at the grocery store, when you're sitting in a waiting room and somebody is, you know, angry, and you don't know why they're angry. You don't know why they're in pain. They're, you know, and that's, I feel like how, is there anything that you could think of to help us? If I'm in the grocery store and the person is in front of me, does it really help to be friendly to someone who's seemingly upset, to smile? Do those things make a difference? Because sometimes people see somebody who's out of sorts, seems to be acting inappropriately, and they recoil. They say, okay, you know what, I don't want to be around that person. Do you have any tips? Is there any, I'm not saying we need to intervene and play doctor, but sometimes to me it feels like somebody having a really bad day and somebody says, how are you? And sincerely means it, or, you know, bends down and picks up something they dropped. That could be the difference between them feeling like they matter and not. Yes.
You know, it's so important that, you know, Amanda Marshall's song, Everybody Has a Story, mm-hmm. that sums it up. The words to that song are incredible. And, you know, I've been talking to my daughters about this. You know, I teach them kindness, respond with kindness, love, and compassion. You know, grace is another one. And it's funny, those teachings are working, because the other day I was driving down my street. My 10-year-old daughter was in the vehicle, and there was a lady stopped in her vehicle, just sitting in her vehicle in the middle of the road.
Oh boy.
And I was like going back and forth that day so much. I'm like, what are you doing? And I got a bit frustrated. And my 10-year-old daughter said, you know what, Mom? Her car might have broken down, or maybe she's like, something's wrong. And I was like, whoa, wow. You know, and even...
And it's
like,
true.
Oh, yes. Like, I immediately went to this judgment, right, of...
You're in my way.
You're in my way. You know, and my 10-year-old daughter says, no, Mom, you know, what if something's wrong? And I was like, okay, the student becomes the teacher and the teacher becomes the student. I love what Jeff Brown says. He says when the student is ready, the student appears.
Yeah.
There's, you know, we're all students.
Yes,
and
that's right.
She was both my student and teacher in that moment.
Yes.
And when you come back to saying about, you know, in the grocery in the grocery store, one of the things that I always do, and even if I'm at a restaurant, I go up and I look at the person's name tag and I say, "Hey, Joan, how are you today?" And I smile. You have no idea how many people have just said, "No one's called me by my name today."
Ever.
Or, "No one's called me by my name for a month." Like they feel like they matter. And it's simple as just a smile. And, and when you were talking about the aggressive person in front of you, it's just stopping for a moment and thinking, okay, what's going on in their day? Something might be not good. Not to condone anyone's behavior, but it's good to just...
And sometimes you don't have to intervene. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to say anything. But just by your energy, by, maybe standing back a bit and giving them space and not being, I've had it where somebody isn't angry or they're trying to do something, they're frustrated and they're taking more time with the cashier at the bank or in the and then they turn around and they look at you and you can tell they're turned around to see how agitated you are at them, because they're agitated because they think they're holding up the lineup. If you can be aware, because you've been there yourself, most of us have,
yep.
and just smile and say, you know what, it's fine. Because the truth is, it is fine. Like I know sometimes people say, but I'm in a hurry and I don't have time and blah, blah, blah. Life is short. And you may change that person's life by being that way. You don't know what's, I've come to that understanding where you just recognize, what would I be in such a hurry for? If I was in that big of a hurry, I should have done it before now, or I won't be here. If I really have to be somewhere else, that's where I should be then, because it changes it. Like you can feel the energy in that person relax when they realize, even if it's just you, there might be 10 people behind you that are all angry. It doesn't matter. You can play your role. And I think that's where what I got out of your book is each one of us can be that difference. We can make that difference. And if there's anything, I think that's so important, is if we're going to change, not just getting rid of the stigma, because there's stigma with everything, but to understand it better, but for the grace of God go I, which really is a truth. We don't know. We can't walk in other people's shoes, but mental illness and depression and postpartum depression and all those kinds of things that we've got stigma because I think more than anything, we are terrified it's going to be us. And we don't want to talk about it because if you talk about it, maybe, it'll visit. It's like...
that's exactly it.
And so was that, now that you have really, you look fantastic, you look healthy, you look rested, you look invigorated, which is awesome. And I'm grateful to see you like that. I really am, Lee. But what, do you feel like we can change our attitude? We can, by sharing in these stories. I mean, I'm sure that's your hope, but have you seen that by changing how you are, how you feel about it, there's no pressure, you're launching this, you've made your commitment, but there's no pressure. I mean, right? This time it's different.
It's really, I've been investigating within myself this whole thing of detachment and, being detached from the outcome.
Yeah.
So it's really just another way of being in the moment.
Yes.
So, yes, I'm in the moment. Yes, I would love for this book to be in the hands of 350 million people worldwide who have depression. Will that happen? I don't know. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I will do what I can to put it out there and hopefully, reach as many people as it can.
Yeah.
And before, when I first launched it, I took, if it didn't reach this amount of people, I took that personally. oh, I thought it was a failure because it didn't, get accepted by this publishing house or this, I had all these stories in my head. But now I'm allowing the book to have its own wings. Yeah. And I don't necessarily want it to be, well, no, I don't want it to be so much about me anymore. It's more about the readers. And
you're not looking for validation anymore. That's the beautiful thing. And I could feel that in the energy, the way that you are, speaking. And there's no urgency. It's simply a very awesome story of a woman who used to be Lee, who has evolved into this amazing Lee. These are experiences that we have in life. Then you tell it as a story. It becomes a tool. And yeah, like you say, it can soar wherever it needs to go. And there's just a different kind of, it's like not having a mission attached to the book. It doesn't have to reach X number of people to be a success in your eyes. It already is a success because you're living it.
Yes. And that's, I think that's going back to one of the first questions you asked. I think that's what makes it feel so easy and right in relaunching this, is before I wasn't mentally healthy. I thought I was, but I wasn't, and there was ego attached, and I was still in depression. I had my own sort of denial and mental health issues going on, and I just feel so peaceful and just at peace with where I am now.
I almost had the sense too, though, that before there was a lot of pressure on you to flip the stigma. Like it was almost like you took it on as your job to get rid of the stigma in the world about mental illness, because so many people would be better off if there wasn't the stigma, which is true. But at the same time, it's not your job. It's it's individually, we each have our piece, and that's the difference, I think, is that when you, and clearly you have moved into a very awesome, empowering place, an empowered place, to be able to launch it knowing that it is your story and it has been told with a great deal of candor and respect and love, and I love that, and I know that it will help to let go of the stigma. But that isn't the mission anymore, and that's what changes it. It's so about total sharing and comes from that place of love that it's amazing, and I really appreciate that you did do that, and that you are healthy and able to do that. So, but I really do think that, Lee, that it's important that what happened before, because you really were taking on this mission, and that really contributed to you becoming unhealthy again. And so you're really showing us what happens when you do set healthy boundaries, when you do value yourself and you figure it out, right?
Yes. Yes, I had done a lot of that to myself. As you said, I did take it on upon myself. I truly believed at that point that I was the only person on earth that could change the stigma and reduce the stigma around. I made it my life mission.
Other people also fed it, Lee. It wasn't just like in your own mind. You were being stroked, your ego, but was being stroked that, Lee, you need to do this. You need to help us. You need to. So there was that also. And I think that's where, I can certainly see the difference in your energy and the difference in how you are approaching it and how you feel about yourself and the book, which is A Quiet, Strong Voice. What a powerful, powerful title. Beautiful.
Yeah. And you know what? It means more to me now than it did. Like, the title means so much more to me now. Like, I can own that.
Yes.
I have my own quiet, strong voice. I am a quiet, strong voice.
Yeah. And we all have it.
And we all have it. And that's the beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Is that, that quiet, strong voice is within all of us. We have that voice of intuition, or whatever
Yeah.
people may think it is. It's all there, but so many times we squash it down with, oh no, oh, I'm too busy or whatever, and we don't listen.
Yeah.
But when we listen to that quiet voice that comes in and the strength that is within that, the strength of love,
Yeah.
miracles can happen. And they do.
Yes, and you're living proof, which is awesome. I mean, we all are when you think about it. I mean, the
Yeah.
times when we really listen. So I want people to know that, of course, go to the website, Let's Get Real, chattingwithcatherine.com. Lee's guest page is there with all the links, plus resources, also available for mental health, and how to get the book. Now, the launch is March the 3rd, and I'm hoping this video will be out before that, just probably a couple of days. So where can they go? Are you going to be in bookstores at all, or is it all going to be online?
At this point, it's all online. Yeah, that's where it is. In Calgary, I will definitely have it at Self Connection Books.
Great.
Yeah, my favorite bookstore in Calgary. And, we'll see what happens. Once again, if it gets into Chapters or, other independent bookstores, excellent.
So
Yeah.
where can they find out, like, are you going to do any book signings or anything? Is that up in the...
Yeah, and that's, this is the beautiful thing, is the only date that I've really got out there for book signings is March 26th at Self Connection Books.
Okay.
And I'm really just trusting and just going with the flow of how this, and I know that they're going to occur, and that will be updated. My incredible Laura Simonson is just working on my new sort of website right now. That'll hopefully be done by the end of the week.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
that will have all the listings of, of upcoming events, and I'll keep that updated. So, this week is an exciting week, and next week will be even more exciting. And I'll have, I'm going with the flow, and as it comes.
Do you have a copy of the book there, by the way, Lee? Because yay.
See it?
Very nice. Oh, that
Yeah,
is
the hard. I didn't have a hard cover last time, so this is actually quite beautiful.
It is beautiful, and I love the butterfly, and it's just it's so it's so perfect. And
Well, it was interesting when I went through this new publisher, Balboa Press, which is a self-publishing arm of Hay House. They discussed changing the cover, and I said, no, here's boundaries again. I said, no, this cover remains because it captures the essence of this book, light and dark, transformation. I've got a big butterfly tattooed on my back. That cover captures that, and I was staying still on that. No, you're not changing the cover.
No, and it is you. It's so you. It's so the lightness and the strength. It's everything is captured in that, in the colors and in the title and everything about it. So I commend you for standing true to yourself and in every way. And this has been a real treat, Lee, to be having this chat with you again, and in such a lighthearted energy, and I just love it. So I'm wishing you the very, very best with the book, and I'm encouraging all of you out there watching to not just get the book so you can find out about mental illness, because I had that understanding the first time it came out, but I feel like it's almost like the preemptive. It's the tools that can help a lot of us, especially young people. Like, I'm not suggesting a 12-year-old read it necessarily, but I am saying, as a parent, read it, and then you can offer the tools to give voice to your child. Like, there's so many beautiful gifts in the way you've written it and taught. Can't say enough about it. I'm so delighted. So thank you, Lee. And is there anything else you'd like to leave with us before we go?
You know what? This has just been an incredible conversation. I love talking. It's just the ease of talking with you. This beautiful conversation. I trust that everything that has needed to be said has been said. So thank you.
Yes, I believe that is true too. So don't forget, go to the website, letsgetrealchatwithkatherine.com. Go to the guest link. You'll get Lee Horbachewski's guest page, and you can find out all about how to get a quiet, strong voice. And until next time, take care.
Isn't that amazing? Thank you to my guests for sharing with us today. Thank you for watching. Feel free to share the link. You can join us for live shows by going to letsgetrealchatwithkatherine.com and listen to the replays from the show page, preview guests, and explore links to our Facebook fan page, WordPress blog, and more. We are creating an exquisite world. Until next time, take care.